what is a belief that you cherish most?
One belief that I cherish right now is being against the feminist movement currently.
What type of feminism? Because I know there's third wave, fourth wave.
Yeah, so I support feminism that fought for individual rights, which would truthfully only be the first wave. Anything after that, I think, is an extraction. So yeah.
Would you mind explaining what the first wave feminism?
Yeah, so I mean, to answer that question, we would have to realize, like, recognize what individual rights are firstly. So I recognize three individual rights of life, liberty, and property as as these rights pertain to rational human beings. So the feminist movement originally started to give women equal opportunity in things such as going outside, freedom of association, freedom of expression, things like basic rights that men had in society essentially. So that form of feminism that fought for individual rights, I support. However, I believe that the current movements have been misconstrued into infringing on individual rights, which is why I don't support them.
Do you think there are like male privilege and female privilege factors in society?
Yeah, so they're different because on a systemic scale, I would say no, women are not oppressed. We can look at child custody cases, arrest rates, criminology. On average, when accounting for all relevant variables, women tend to receive lesser sentences for the same crime. They tend to win more child custody cases, even in instances where they may be unfit to parent compared to their male counterpart. I recognize that men do commit a disproportionate amount of crimes against women than vice versa. However, I wouldn't really consider either of these factors a form of privilege, so no.
I'm pretty sure you've heard of the recent the 97% statistic. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, so well, first of all, this statistic just is misconstrued. So out of the 97%, I believe it was 44% of the 97 that had to do with staring. Like women said they were stared in a way that made them feel uncomfortable, and this was a good chunk of the statistic. When we talk about staring and things like that, calling that sexual harassment, I feel is pretty disingenuous because sexual harassment, I believe, is something that should be punished by law, strictly even. So when we say that, staring is something that is sexual harassment, is it something we ought to make illegal? Is it something we can make illegal practically? No, I would say not. So then that's the first part of the statistic. Second part, there's another 37% that had to do with being followed. Now, besides this already being arbitrary, like you never know if you're actually being followed or if it's just a fear. There's no way to actually determine if you're being followed in a sexual context. For example, you could have been followed. Somebody wanted to rob you, which somebody wanted to kill you, which obviously isn't good, but it's something that needs to be made distinct from sexual harassment. And then besides this, I don't know like how many people are familiar with statistics, but the way the data was extrapolated, it was about 1,089 people. The original thing was 1,400 because people took it multiple times, but it was about 1,089 women. And it was an open survey, so naturally, women that are familiar with sexual assault experiences are going to be more inclined to share their story about such thing, rather than someone said, "Oh, I've never dealt with this. There's no point in me doing this." So that's kind of like the three things that make this statistic inaccurate. But yeah.
Okay, you talked about how like being stared at and being like, or think women thinking that they're being followed makes them uncomfortable. Well, shouldn't we like promote an environment where women should feel more safer and
Well,
comfortable?
yeah, and that's the thing with following. I'm not saying if maybe they're following you, they're saying vulgar things, you've asked them to stop, they won't stop. That we can definitely consider sexual harassment. But just following on its own, I don't think we can. Along with what you said, in order to make women feel safer, I'm a big believer in gun rights. I'm a big believer in owning a firearm, protecting yourself. So things like that, I think would make women feel safer.
Okay, and also for the sample size for the study itself, don't you think 1,000 is big enough, or what would you say is a
Well,
good?
it's not necessarily like we could have 500 and still get more accurate of a percentage. What it was an open survey that was concentrated, as I mentioned. So like women, that it wasn't like random. It wasn't presented to all different types of people throughout the UK. It was said, here, take this sexual assault survey. So it didn't really give an equal chance for people that hadn't experienced it to have to take that survey and give an accurate response.
Okay, and you think a woman should be able to hold guns, right? In your pro-gun
Yeah.
part, why do you think women should hold guns? Because wouldn't that still be like a bad thing?
Well, I mean, yeah, that kind of goes back to the thing with individual rights. As long as there's less gun restrictions on private property, even public property, I support open carrying of firearms. They've been statistically shown to reduce crime in nearly every, instance, whether we talk about burglary, whether we talk about sexual assault. Um, gun owning a gun, you're already just from a rational perspective less likely to be approached in a sexual manner. Just factors like that I think are important when we look at gun statistics.
Okay, and when you say like owning guns, you don't mean like to prevent like staring, you mean like actual sexual assault,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, yeah, even so, I don't think staring is really anything. So,
And they should probably carry it at all times.
yeah, I would encourage that, but if they don't want to, that's that.
Do you think, I think a question that a lot of people have in like today's society, or what they fight for, is do you think all women, or like I don't know if you want to include the LGBTQ community, do you think they're all equally, like, would you say they're equal to like men in society?
In what regard?
And like I would say like any like social, economical, because there's like the gender pay gap and like
Yeah, so with the pay gap, it's been reduced many times to about a 3% difference in the amount men and women make. And I've already touched on this. Even if it does exist, I believe that private employers have the right to pay their employees whatever they want. So that's what happens when we talk about the pay gap. Um, I like I mentioned with the systemic challenges that men face compared to women, they're different, right? Like women can say, "Oh, we're paid 3% less on average," but if we were to commit a crime, we'd receive about a 4-year lower sentence for all violent crime. So it's just like it's kind of a give and take for what you're going to consider privilege and what's just going to be considered just a random factor like the wage gap. But yeah.
Okay, and you said you think private owners should be able to give whatever, like how much money they want to their worker.
Yes.
So do you think they should be allowed to discriminate to that one gender, or like,
Yeah, well, yeah, I support, the freedom of association. So I think any sort of regulation on that would be an infringement of property rights. Private property you is an inherent rights given that, private property is just an extension of man's mind. So whenever we pass legislation, such as anti-discrimination laws, equal pay laws, all of this just is a violation of rights. So yeah, I would oppose anything like that.
but do you think it's like morally wrong to do that?
Yeah, of course. I would say it's morally wrong to discriminate. It just I would protect their right to do so.
Well, yeah, you talked about the right to life. So would you mind like elaborating a little bit more
The
on
right
that?
to life.
Yeah, the right to life, and elaborating a little bit more on that
Yeah,
part.
so rights are just moral principles that we ought not to infringe upon. Rights are applicable to rational beings, so that's why I don't consider animals have rights. And rights are granted to individuals, right? So, like, I guess the right to life, where most people this kind of comes in, is like abortion, which most feminists do not like are pro-choice. I'm pro-life, but I see the fetus as an individual, therefore deserving of the right to life. But yeah.
Where do you think your um non-feminist views come from, or do you think anything from your like personal life influenced
Well,
that decision?
I mean, more so just my political like philosophy. After learning more about capitalism and learning about, where do rights come from, how are rights implemented, just when you learn the basic philosophical principles that drive all of humankind to be able to act, right? Like human action, then you'll realize movements like BLM and the feminist movement are actually antithetical to what they're supposedly fighting for.
Okay, and where do you think you got your principles from? Those principles from?
Um, that's again, I think it would just have to be reading.
Okay.
There's a lot of philosophers like Ayn Rand, Mises, Rothbard that just really they're good on principles.